DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. We are joined now by Brett Siegel, NBA reporter for Clutch Points. Brett, good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Good. You know, Brett, it's so funny when you do radio or TV, and as we have found out now as we've gotten more experience with, sports on the web, you can predict a winner. You can tell people exactly what's going to happen with a game or a trade or a free agent signing. But really gets people going is the little things. And you're on the air this morning because of a little thing you wrote, but it really captures it. And it's what you wrote about the Jazz, and they are basically, as I paraphrase and mangle it, the head-scratchingest team in the NBA.
Right, and I think that this offseason, when you look at where this organization has been, it's been a lot of question marks. What were they going to do with Lauri Markkanen? What were they going to do with some of the other veterans on this roster, like John Collins, Jordan Clarkson? Is this going to be a team that hits the reset button, or like Danny Ainge in the front office have been pleading, is this going to be a team that looks to kind of contend and make moves to put themselves in a position to get back to where they were several years ago with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert before they made those trades? Obviously, this offseason has been head-scratching, like I wrote, and it's been valid to feel that way if you're a Jazz fan, where, sure, it's great to see Lauri Markkanen extend and stay, but what's going to be the next move? Because obviously him being on this roster as a star is not enough. You need more talent, especially in the Western Conference, and then all those other pieces. Well, what's going to happen with them, especially since you are developing Keontae George to be your focal point of the backcourt moving forward, and now you have three new rookies coming in. It's just a lot of uncertainty surrounding this franchise right now, and I think that we're going to have a lot of questions answered as we inch closer to the start of the season, and then obviously when the trade deadline comes around in February.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a lot of truth from the outside perspective of what you're saying. Fans are talking about here, and we interact with fans all the time, obviously, is that, what is it? You're trying to win, you're trying to lose. And sort of having both feet in doesn't really work. And you want a top 3 pick, not a top 10 pick. And if you go toward losing, then go all the way. Don't be like almost half the season and then trade your vets. Is that the way you see it in terms of head scratching? Because it can't be all of a sudden they sign Mills and it's a head scratcher for you personally. It's got to be a bunch of stuff, right?
Right, and that's kind of the whole focus of this offseason, where Patty Mills, everyone knows around the league what he can bring to the table. He's a seasoned veteran, one of the better veteran point guards that was available at this point in free agency, and you bring him in to kind of be a mentor for some of these young guys like Keontae George, like we mentioned. Obviously, you still have Colin Sexton, who he's been in the league for several years now, but he's still only 26 years old, and he could be a focal point next to Keontae George moving forward. So obviously bringing in Mills, that's more of an off-the-court move and a locker room move than on the court. But it's totally understandable, the point that you brought up, of what direction is this team really going. And if they're going to be losing and looking to tank for draft picks in the 2025 draft, well, what moves are you going to do to set yourself up for that? Because obviously they're not the worst team in the league, and that was proven last season. And when they're healthy, they do have a competitive-looking roster. I think that the Jazz can be a team in that maybe 9, 10, 11 spot in the Western Conference. Do I see them making the playoffs? I don't. But again, if you're going to be a team that's really tanking and looking towards the future to capitalize on the draft, well, you really got to put yourself in a position to do so. And I think that right now they're kind of stuck in that purgatory mode where they do have guys that can be foundational pieces and secondary pieces for a playoff contending team, but they're also looking to develop for the future. And I think that's kind of where the conundrum lies right now.
I get what happened year one. We all thought they were going to be bad. They started out 10-3. It caught everybody off guard. Nobody saw it coming. Danny Ainge was asked about it, and he said he was pleasantly surprised. But year two, I thought, okay, now they can really focus on the tank. And I don't blame them for re-signing Markkanen. There aren't that many 7-footers who can shoot, and you've got one and you're trying to rebuild. It seems like losing him is a big step back. I'm not sure I get why they have so many veterans, and I get if you turn all the young guys loose together, it could go wrong and they don't develop and they need the veteran voices. But do you think they're going to be shedding veterans midseason and avoiding what they had 2 years ago where it was a surprisingly good start and that wrecked any chance they have of drafting 1, 2, 3, 4?
I certainly think that there's going to be a team that makes moves, and Danny Ainge is, in my opinion, one of the better executives in the league. He's always known kind of what his plan is moving forward. We've seen that during his time with the Boston Celtics, what he was able to achieve, and now helping and aiding in the Jazz front office. I think that same philosophy exists of looking towards the future. And obviously when you look ahead towards the trade deadline, the one player that I circle and look at he's probably going to draw some attraction midseason based on injuries and what's happening with other teams. I think that's Jordan Clarkson. And you look at Clarkson, he's 32 years old right now. He's on a very favorable contract. And he's on one of those contracts that we've kind of seen get eliminated this offseason in the sense of he's one of those middle-tier players. He's making around $14 million this year, and then he's under contract again for $14 million for the 25-26 season. We're not seeing many of those contracts being given out anymore in free agency because of this new first and second apron rules and all the financial restrictions that teams are facing by crossing the first and second apron. Obviously, the Jazz are not one of those teams. They're a team that actually had to sign players and give money away just to reach the salary cap floor this season, and that's kind of a big reason why we saw them sign Mikhailuk, a shooter from the Boston Celtics. One of the reasons why we've also seen them give Drew Eubanks his contract, and many have kind of questioned that contract, but it makes sense when you look at they had to reach this salary cap floor, and they're still a team that is not ready to contend at the highest level possible. They're still building and looking to develop their youth further. So in terms of guys that could be moved, I think that Jordan Clarkson is absolutely the first guy that we look at. John Collins is a player that has been rumored to be on the block for the Jazz since last season. And then obviously there's going to be questions about Colin Sexton's future simply because you just drafted Isaiah Collier in the draft. You have George there. You brought back Johnny Uzang on a contract. So what's kind of your backcourt looking at? And I think that we're going to get a lot of answers to that this season. And I wouldn't count out the Jazz not only being sellers, but possibly being a buyer as well and looking to get Markkanen another star to pair with to really grow this young core.
So you think the veterans that you just mentioned would be having more trade value at the trade deadline than leading up to the season or early in the season? Is that accurate?
I do, yes. And I think that the main point there is that the NBA season is unpredictable. You don't know which teams are going to start hot, which teams are going to get hot late, what injuries are going to happen, and that obviously plays a role in how teams view some of these guys like Sexton, Collins, and Clarkson. If they have a clear need for a player like that because of injuries, that could be more appealing to them, and they may be willing to pay the price at the trade deadline. Obviously, heading into the season, and based on how we've seen things go this offseason, everything's very quiet right now. Teams aren't looking to make trades. There hasn't really been any trade conversations around the league. It's just going to be more of those wait-and-see type of seasons simply because of these new financial rules and teams pretty much being done with their roster reconstruction at this point.
I'm curious about trading those guys like Collins and Clarkson because I just don't know how financially teams are going to make it work. They're right up against it. I do wonder about the motivation of making a trade where somebody's up against the apron and the team isn't performing and everything. We need some salary relief here. The Jazz can take on salary, and they could give back a veteran or two. They could give back a couple of young players. They've just drafted 6 guys in 2 years, and Kessler's only in his 3rd year. Plus, they got draft picks. So a couple players, a couple picks, and cap relief. Do you think there's a chance that the Jazz are going to be able to get a star for pennies on the dollar because of the pressure of the second apron of financial penalties? And billionaires love their money. They don't want to give it away.
There's definitely going to be teams that have that mindset of we need to look at our financial future. We need to dip below the tax line, this and that. And obviously, when you look at the Jazz, they're in a very attractive situation there because, like you mentioned, they can offer up veterans. They can take on salary. I believe they're well below the first tax apron. I think it's around $36 million below it. So right there, you can take on at least 1 or 2 contracts if you wanted to. And all of a sudden, you're a team that you're still looking for the future. You're still developing your youth, and you have draft picks in the 2025 draft, which is loaded at the top with a ton of talent. I believe there's 7 or 8 guys right now that have that number 1 pick potential. And if they were in this year's draft, they would have been undoubtedly top 3 picks. So you look ahead of that 2025 draft, there's some very attractive names there that Utah is going to have their eyes on. And if they can grab one of those guys, and let's just say it's a player like Cooper Flagg, who many are calling the presumable 2025 first overall pick, You bring in Cooper Flagg, pair him with Lauri Markkanen and this young core that you've built. All of a sudden, the Jazz are looking like an up-and-coming team in the West that suddenly does now have that sense of direction. And for me, I think it's just the lack of sense of direction derives from the fact that they only have Lauri Markkanen as their star and their future piece moving forward. These other guys just seem like fillers right now, not discussing the young core, more of Sexton, Clarkson, Collins. Those are all kind of filler players that the Jazz have right now that aren't going to necessarily be a part of their long-term core. So now the question becomes, who's going to be that next guy that you get next to Markkanen? Are you going to find it on the trade market? Are you going to look for the draft? I think we may see a situation where it's a little bit of both. And the one situation that I've been monitoring in the league in terms of trade talks and looking at the Jazz is, well, would Brandon Ingram potentially be a player that they'd be interested in because he's in the final year of his contract? The New Orleans Pelicans want to win, and if that doesn't happen over the course of the first half of the season, with Ingram being in the final year of his contract and then not wanting to give him that big extension, could he suddenly become a target for the Jazz? And I think that's going to be a question that we monitor all season long, and I think that's going to be a question that the Jazz truly do ponder within the walls of their front office.
Oh, man, Markkanen and Flagg, be still my beating heart. That would be cool if they have those two. What do you think of the rooks, the three rooks and the three guys last year? I got to believe that at least one or two of these players are going to be decent.
You certainly hope so. And obviously, Keontae George, I think, has been fantastic. I think that he's everything that the Jazz have wanted, and I think that there's still plenty of room to grow there. Obviously, Bryce Sensabaugh has work to do as well on the wing, and this is going to be a big year for him to prove himself. And Taylor Hendricks as well, another first-round pick from last year, a stretch big man, and I think that they're really going to put pressure on him to improve as a rebounder and improve as a defender. I think those are the two areas that can really help the Jazz next to Markkanen, so it can take pressure off of the finish forward's back. You look at the three rookies this year, Cody Williams, he's going to be a work in progress. I think that he's not a guy that can necessarily come in right away and impact winning like his brother Jalen Williams did with the OKC Thunder. I think that he has work to do on both ends of the court, which is fine because, like we mentioned, the Jazz aren't in a contending position right now. They can focus on his development, and I think that this may be one of the best positions for him to really get that hands-on development. You look at some of the other rookies, you got Kyle Filipkowski, Isaiah Collier, two more guys that they're going to work with extensively throughout the season, probably see some time in the G League for Collier. And the question for Filipkowski is, can he be a serviceable big man behind Walker Kessler? Is he going to be more of a guy that you keep in the low post, or are you going to utilize his passing abilities at the top of the arc? Because I thought that he was pretty impressive at Duke with his ability to facilitate an offense. So I do think that there's potential here with the Jazz, obviously in a better position than some other teams that have similar records as them from last season, where the Jazz have an established young core that they're focused on, they're building with, and they do have these veterans that can help them out. And obviously a guy like Patty Mills is really going to help Keontae George and Isaiah Collier as well. As far as the head-scratching stuff, that's simply about the direction of the franchise. I think that there's still questions to be answered, and over the course of the next 3-4 months, we're going to get the answers to those questions of who are the Jazz and what direction are they going.
Well, Brett, we appreciate your time. Thanks for writing something that caught our interest. We appreciate it. And thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. You guys have a great weekend.
Brett Siegel, NBA reporter for Clutch Points, joining us right here on The Zone. DJ and PK, when we come back, everything you missed in this show, the football, the basketball, the soccer, it's all coming up. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone.